His Excellency President Dr. Mohammed Irfaan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Honorable Vice President Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, Minister Reem, Sir Tony Blair, former Presidents Mr. Ivan Duque, President of the IDB, special invitees, CARICOM Secretary General, one and all, special guests. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon at our side event. I would like to also extend a special welcome to the Chairperson of the National Two Shelves Council and his representatives here today, and to welcome you all to the Guyana Pavilion and to our side event entitled Guyana, 15 Years of Leadership on Low Carbon Development and Forests. To start things off, I invite you to take a look at our video presentation as we get things going for the next 45 minutes or so of fruitful discussions and sharing of experiences as we reflect on the Guyana story. My name is Pradeepa Bolnaut, and I'm very happy to steer the ship over the next 45 minutes or so as we listen to, talk about, discuss, and learn about the Guyana work and the Guyana story over the last decade and a half on forests and low carbon development.
You're safe. Very efficient.
Thank you very much. I did promise you a brief video, and that is an appetizer for the next 45 minutes or so, where you'll see a lot more, hear a lot more about the Guyana story. In that video, I hope you got a sense, even though it was just for 1 minute, on the richness of forest biodiversity and the pristine nature of Guyana, and that infuses a sense of strong optimism that there is hope yet for the world as we battle with complex challenges of the climate crisis. Guyana's work over the last few years commenced with a vision that started way back in 2008 by our then President, Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, who expressed a vision which led to close to 13 years of a developing story that was carefully crafted into a model that proves to the world that forests are worth more alive than dead. The vision has been realized through Guyana's engagement and partnerships with the government of Norway over the early years of our work. During the last 10 years or so, our journey on the bilateral cooperation with Norway yielded significant resources and benefits and lessons learned. And then over the most recent 3 to 4 years, our engagement with the Architecture for REDD+ transaction and the Arts Secretariat, and working closely with the leading thinkers in the space from the FCLP. And that impetus, which started and continued over the years, started in Glasgow and continued over the years. What Guyana has done over the last 13 years or so has led to many lessons learned, partnerships created, and innovation. The persons on the panel here today exemplify exactly this, and they will show how the Guyana model could be replicated around the world, and the lessons that we can take away from this model that can work indeed at different scales in other countries. But enough from me. My job is to simply pass over to the experts here on the stage, our panelists today, to give you that objective oversight on the Guyana story, And I hope leaving today, you will all feel that sense of optimism, that sense of partnership, and that sense of hope, hearing the story and the lessons learned from the Guyana perspective. There is no better person to start things off than our president, Dr. Mohammed Irfaan Ali.
Thank you very much, Pradeepa. I think Pradeepa has been very modest. She is our lead negotiator on climate change. So as you can see, we have a very young, talented person leading us here. I know that the environment is fitting for what we're discussing. The noise around allows us to be in a forest environment. So let us just accept it as one of the features of the forest, the songs of the forest. First of all, I want us to look at what we are presenting from Guyana as a model. And it is not a model that is static. What we built in this model is the ability to be adaptable and flexible. The model has a feature of understanding challenges and confronting challenges as we implement, because this is not a theoretical position. This is actually the development of a model that is working for Guyana and can work for every forested country. And what we have done is that we have integrated the forests and a model in the low carbon development strategy in every single policy of the government. So it forms the basis of policy making across the policy environment in the government. So everything is linked to the LCDS. It is an economic model. It speaks about job creation, livelihood. And that is why in the model itself, we have identified a number. 15% of all the resources we earn from the forest goes directly to the indigenous community. And the indigenous community then have the power to determine how they use that money for the improvement of their livelihood, improve economic opportunity, and to do things in the community that leads to sustainability and help with sustainability. So that is an important feature of the model that we have advanced in the LCDS 2030. Another aspect of the model is looking at biodiversity and the pharmaceutical industry, and looking at the other ecological services that the forest offers. So as the model is implemented over the years, we know that there will be a value, there must be a value that is attached to biodiversity. From 1970 to now, we have lost more than 68% of our biodiversity. And that is as a result of deforestation and the loss of forests. So we don't hear much about this, the loss of biodiversity and how that is impacting the environment and so on. But safeguarding the forest and deploying the forest at jurisdictional scale in this fight on climate change allows us also the added benefit that comes in ecological services, biodiversity, for the pharmaceutical industry and so on. So the forest, as you know, is the size of England and Scotland combined. We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world, 0.036%. The forests, we have a number of agreements. In the first LCDS, we were able to have an agreement with Norway, a partnership with Norway that saw payment for carbon services. Then we had an end-user agreement with Hess Corporation. So what we have in the LCDS is a model that is applicable for every single forested country. And we are working now with the Commonwealth, we are working with other countries in the region, in the AU, so that we can advance this model as a sustainable policy on forests that add value, create jobs, build communities, enhance sustainability, and create opportunities for the people in the country. There are 6 areas really that we are advocating. The forest area, the priority areas that we are pushing, is to advocate for the Glasgow Leaders Declaration. That is a pledge by over 150 countries to halt and reverse forest loss by 2030. This is important to ensure that we move in a manner in which we can halt or reduce forest loss by 2030. The second objective is to grow global carbon markets, to provide a major source of funding to achieve the goals of the GLD through 4 tracks. A is result-based payment, which has 2 components. And in our model, Guyana received $240 million from Norway during our phase 1. And in the second phase, we have been able to enter an agreement with Hess Corporation for $750 million. In the case of the voluntary markets, we're seeking to grow jurisdictional scale, national scale voluntary markets through the consolidation of high quality standard. The entire forest is R3 certified. We're working with guidance agency to help determine corporate guidelines for buying high quality credits. And then you have the compliance market, where we're working with leading countries across the world to establish forest credit within compliance market for long-term price strength and stability. And then we have the UNFCCC transaction, once Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is operational in full. So the third area, is to reduce transaction costs for forest carbon finance. The fourth area is work regionally within the Amazon to support other national approaches with a particular focus on partnering with Brazil. I know President Dugue was leading this in the Amazon and working towards the creation of a common market within the region. We believe different approaches can come together, so it is not necessary for everyone to agree on markets versus non-markets. And the advocacy. We are now working on advocacy, ensuring that forests is on the front burner, is on the value of the forest is understood. For a very long time, the value of the forest, standing forest, was not given any attention. Now that we have the attention on the forest, we intend to amplify that work so that we'll have greater attention coming, and the forest, which is a significant component in the climate equation, must be able to earn the type of resources that it can generate and contribute to the economic development and advancement of our country. So the LCDS as a model is one that speaks to sustainability, one that speaks to opportunity, livelihood opportunity, job opportunity, sustainable job opportunity. It speaks to the issue of agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and also within the LCDS itself, we speak about renewable energy and how we can have transition to renewable energy. Now, the question is, with Guyana now entering the realm of a petroleum producing country, how do we match this? So our position is very clear. One is that even when we are at full capacity, we will be net positive in terms of our emissions. We'll be net positive. And the second issue here is that whilst we are pursuing the petroleum industry and we are looking at renewables, we are also committing to the safeguarding of the forest and deploying that forest in a jurisdictional scale for climate services around the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your leadership and for that succinct overview of the Guyana story. Thank you very much for that. We now go to Minister Ream. Minister Ream is the Minister with responsibility for state and international cooperation. Minister Ream, I would pick your brains a bit here to take off from what His Excellency the President just spoke about, the Guyana experience. And if you can share with us a bit on the main takeaway messages from the Guyana story and how this could be applicable to other countries, replicated perhaps, and specifically the experience of the UAE, and how has this experience been pursued in terms of striking that balance between energy security and climate security?
Great, thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Irfaan, for inviting me and for being here amongst all of you. Let me begin by saying that Guyana was very clear-sighted about picking her North Star. She, 15 years ago, and obviously I'll refer to her as a woman, was determined to ensure that your low-carbon development strategy would be your guiding principle. And here there's a lesson for all of us, that if you have that clarity of thought, that persistence, and then a long game that you are in the business of, you see a development case such as Guyana that's incredibly successful. And gone are the days where we could only learn from a particular hemisphere. Today, if I look back at my own nation, our North Star in the 70s was infrastructure. We really doubled down on high-performing ports, airports, airlines, and creating that infrastructure physically, but then layering up a digital infrastructure to it gave us our strength. But we are all united in understanding that our planet is in trouble, and we need to address that as well. And so here, we don't only admire Guyana, but we're learning from Guyana. And since they are leaps and miles ahead of many in terms of looking at low-carbon development as a North Star, it's been incredibly heartwarming for me when I visited Guyana recently, but I've known of Guyana for many years, feel almost half Guyanese actually, and truly admire, and I'm looking forward to where this nation will take you, but also where it'll take the rest of your region and beyond. So to sum it up, Pradeepa, I think it's the focus on that North Star, and we can all have it. It doesn't need to come copy-pasted from any one nation or any one model, but if it's customized to yours and you have the leg room to keep it long-term, then you can actually see some pretty incredible magic emerge from that as well.
Thank you very much, Minister Reem. Thank you for those perspectives and for showing how the model, even though it is centralized within South America, the Caribbean, through Guyana, it could be replicated anywhere around the world. And we appreciate your perspectives on the UAE experience and how that balance is best struck.
So if I just add one more
Absolutely.
thing, we don't have forests. When you say you have forests more than England and Scotland combined, you know, we get a little dizzy because we're excited about the little trees you see on site. I keep wanting to point to them and say, look, that's new, we just got it.
How much it costs you?
And how much it continues to cost us. But you have it, mashallah, in plentyfold. But we've started with mangroves. And so there are many models we may not have these necessary global common goods, but then global common goods go beyond the forest and the ocean. They include other spaces as well, which we are very keen on pursuing too.
Thank you, Minister Reem. And indeed, Guyana's low-carbon development strategy covers both the green and the blue economies. And I think the importance of mangroves in that space has been very topical globally and certainly for Guyana as well. We now move to the global perspective in terms of the role of forests in climate financing, by a true expert who's been involved in the field for many years, for many decades. And I speak to no other than Sir Tony Blair, the chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Sir Tony, could you perhaps speak a bit about the main programs that the Tony Blair Institute has been involved in terms of leading this fight and contributing to this balanced approach? And what are the global lessons that the world can take away from the Guyana story?
Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be with you here, and certainly to express my congratulations to Guyana, to the President for the work Guyana is doing. We work in a number of different projects around the world. We're in roughly 35 to 40 countries. Many of those are clean energy projects. They might go from everything from trying to help the Nigerian system to get more people on the grid so that you have less informal energy systems that are obviously have a bad effect on the environment, to big hydroelectric projects that can replace coal-fired power. And around the world, we see the same things. And this is what's interesting to me about the Guyana story. Number one, as Reem was just saying, you've got to have a long-term strategy. Right. So this was the low carbon development strategy was announced in 2009 by the then President Jagdeo, but it's been continued now by this president, and that continuity of policy is absolutely essential. These things, they take a long time to do, and the hardest thing, particularly if you operate in a democratic system, is to take long-term decisions, because, by the way, the benefits may appear after you've gone, and so it's that. In this case. I wasn't going to say that, but since so that's the first thing. It requires long-term strategy pursued over a consistent period of time. The second thing is there's obviously got to be the will to take difficult decisions. Now, the fact that deforestation has not occurred in Guyana, it's occurred in many other places, but really it's been a very, very small amount. That took political will, right? And it also meant difficult decisions, because there were opportunities to engage in short-term commercial profit for deforestation, and those were rejected. But that brings me to the third thing that's really important, which is you do have to unite the long-term benefits of the economy with the long-term benefits for protecting the climate. In other words, it's much harder to get people to accept that you're taking action that's necessary to protect the climate if they don't see any economic benefit also from doing so. And that's why it's important both that they have the carbon credit mechanism, so that has helped actually put money back into those local communities, and that they're turning biodiversity into an actual benefit, economic benefit for the country. So that's the third thing, and that is very important. Otherwise, your risk is that you may have the political will, but your country in the end, unless it can see the benefit to their living standards as a whole, that they won't support it. And the final thing is that I think what Guyana has managed to do in a way that I don't think many other countries have been able to, is that they've been able to go out and explain why it is they're doing what they're doing. And you need to always, in these circumstances, you need to take your own country with you. And everyone who's certainly in a whether a democratic system or not, frankly, you can come to the COP conferences and you can make the speeches and so on, but when it comes to the implementation, you have to bring your people with you. If they're not with you, then pretty soon they tire of that. They have had a strategy for communicating to their people, and now communicating to the outside world has been immensely important. So it's only recently I made my first visit to Guyana, but I'm amazed by what I see. It's an extraordinary country. It's about to embark on a huge process of change, but their leadership on this issue is really important for the world.
Thank you very much, Sir Tony Blair, for those global perspectives. So I go now to our neighbor, our South American neighbor, and I would like to welcome and to invite former President of Colombia, Mr. Ivan Duque, to share with us perspectives from the South American experience. How do we take what we've learned in Guyana and take that to different scales, different examples, and how do we face and confront different challenges that might come up with the experience of the Guyana model?
Well, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be in this panel, such a distinguished group. And what I would love to highlight is why Guyana represents maybe one of the most compelling stories today in the conciliation between development, energy transition, protection of the environment, and also social transition. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the state policy, something that was conceived by President Jagdeo at the time that has now been embraced, modernized, and re-enthusiastized, if I use that word, by President Ali. And he has given it a vision for the new generation of Guyanese people at the same time that there is a social transition taking place. And the reason why I mention it's our social transition is because they're using the benefits of having this reservoir of energy to enhance human development. and to allow people to improve their income per capita, and at the same time be able to make the largest social investment ever done in the country. That's something that I will highlight as well. But what matters here is that Guyana has embraced that social transition and that energy transition with the concept of also moving from its dependency on oil for electricity production and trying to bring a sustainable energy policy that is able to conciliate the usage of our resource, but also switching the dependency on the same resource for the electricity deployment in the country. That makes a lot of sense. And this is connected with something that is also crucial for the country's environmental development. Guyana has not only a low deforestation rate, but also almost 40% of the forest and the land has been granted with titles to indigenous communities. That is a reference model in the Americas, and it's a reference model in the Caribbean and obviously for the whole planet. But the challenge is, how do we connect that 40% also with the declaration of protected areas and effectively protecting it over time and being compensated for that declaration? Because what has happened for Guyana is low deforestation rate, huge protection, but they have not been able to monetize with the local communities that effort, and I think that's why this conversation in COP is so important. Because it's a biodiversity superpower, and we need to identify the right smart finance so that the benefits of conservation come to the indigenous communities in a country like Guyana, and that is one of the important elements of the low carbon development strategy. And last but not least, I would say, how can we see Guyana in the context of the Western Hemisphere? Guyana is crucial for the food security of the Caribbean, Carla. It's crucial. Guyana is crucial for the energy security of the Western Hemisphere. Guyana is keen and also a vibrant element of the whole biodiversity protection of the Amazon. And Guyana is also crucial to the entitlement of local indigenous communities in the protection of biodiversity. Those are the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about this. And leading the Concordia Amazon Initiative, we're going to host our next summit in Guyana in June 2024, because we want to bring investors, we want to bring multilaterals like the IDB, and concentrate in something that we have called the investment in market-driven, nature-based solutions. That's why we're so enthusiastic about this story. And President Ali, thank you for your leadership. And I'll just close by saying that we did a lot of these things in Colombia. We were able to pass from 13% to 30% of the territory declared protected area. Lord Goldsmith, who was leading that effort at the government in the UK, supported us. And something that people thought it was impossible to achieve in 3 years, we made it possible. And today, this is bringing to Colombia massive amount of resources. If we did it, and I told that to President Ali, if Guyana now starts advancing on those declared protected areas, we will see market-driven, nature-based solutions in a country that is a reference model today in the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. I think the most important takeaway there is market-driven, nature-based solutions. And that will be a point we will remember from your message, President Duque. I now pass over to the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Dr. Ilan Golfan. And I'm hoping, Dr. Golfan, you can share with us a perspective on how do we go about modernizing the world financial architecture to face the realities of what really is needed now in terms of innovation, in terms of what nature-based financing that President Duque spoke about, and how do we mobilize this to really make it make sense for transformational development, particularly with reference to the upcoming chairmanship of the IDB in terms of the MDBs. And as well, if you could reflect and share your vision about the challenges and the opportunities that the region is now facing, and drawing from perspectives of both IDB Invest and IDB Lab.
First, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. President Ali, I want to congratulate Guyana for the model, for the commitment to environmental sustainability. As you know, when things look right, everybody wants to be part of it. So I would say IDB has been a partner. We are proud to have participated in the first phase of the low carbon development strategy with the bilateral with Norway. We are committed to the transition to renewable energy, including a project building solar farms and energy storage. We want to congratulate you also for becoming the world's first country to be issued jurisdictional carbon credits. So those are not small things. Brazil just passed a legislation on carbon credits, and that brings me to my second point, is how can we work together? We have a nice coincidence in the region. The IDB will be leading, the MDBs will have the presidency next year, 2024, starting tomorrow. And the G20 presidency also moves to the region. And we have a coincident agenda. And this agenda is part of the answer. So how we can think about the multilaterals to contribute and help. And I will separate it into impact and scale. Let me start with scale. We need to increase. The IDB, we just announced, we will be tripling our resources to climate finance from 50 billion that we had to 150 billion for the next decade, just for climate finance and nature. But our resources are not enough. We need to mobilize private sector. And this is where we need to think about innovative financial solutions, innovative instruments, and there are innovative instruments. Think about our IDB Klima, which is basically a sustainability linked product, which means that you provide loans or bonds that have lower cost if you achieve your target. And the target, a very clear target goal that can be measured, one of them tends to be deforestation. Other instruments like debt to nature or debt to climate is booming. We've done with Ecuador a swap from old to new bonds where we guaranteed. There was also political insurance involved, and Ecuador could save $1 billion, and part of it went to Galapagos. We are now announcing with Barbados a debt for climate. So there are ways of increasing scale. But scale without impact is not enough. So what is the impact? We need to figure out how we can maximize the impact. And the agenda needs to have first the awareness that we are looking not to just lend, but to lend and have impact. We need to coordinate in country platforms where we come together. We need to look at how our lending actually involve capacity in the countries, so we need to have technical assistance. So when you join the scale with the impact, we can actually get there. So thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goldfeiner, for those global perspectives from the financial side. I now turn the microphone back to our president for perspectives on 2 points that were raised by President Duque as well as Sir Tony Blair with regards to how has Guyana undertaken to move the monetizing of forest carbon credits to the grassroots level, to the community level, and how has that been made to work, and what has been the impact so far?
Well, first of all, we have challenges too in Guyana. One of the main challenges that on the coastline, where most of our agriculture is done, we are 6 feet below sea level. So we are exposed to severe forms of flooding. And with rising sea levels, you can understand the challenges we have. We have to find resources for adaptation. Where would this resource come from? And this is one of the fundamental investment that we have made with resources that we have earned from the carbon sale. We have been able to fund our adaptation plan. We have been able to, in a sustainable way, plan now investment for adaptation for our farmers and also in the indigenous community. We are now helping them, as I said before, 15% of the revenue goes directly to the villages. We have more than 500 projects in more than 200 villages on the way now. To the extent that some of them have invested heavily in ecotourism. Some of them are investing in solar energy project, hydroponics, and they're able now to develop climate-smart agriculture, climate-smart and sustainable livelihood programs, developing and improving the education system, mechanizing and improving productivity. So these are some of the investments that the villages are making as a result of the earnings we have made. And don't underestimate the impact on financing adaptation, because that is key. We will lose our agriculture, we will lose our arable lands if we are not able to finance adaptation. For a very long time, the one flood event wipes out more than 60% of the GDP. So you can imagine the impact. We are now in a position, and this is part of the model. The model speaks not only about sustaining the forest, it shows you a clear framework on how the resources would help to improve livelihood, advance the creation of jobs, help in adaptation, because adaptation is an important part of job creation and keeping jobs in a sustainable way. And it's part of ensuring that we address the issue of food security. President Dugue said that we have the potential of feeding all of CARICOM. But we will lose that potential if we cannot invest in securing the farmlands, in the drainage and irrigation of the land. And these are not simple expenditure. These are very weighty expenditure, and they're recurrent. Because in our case, because of how we are located, the drainage and irrigation expenditure, these are recurrent expenditure. So that is how we have been able to link the revenue directly to the communities, the creation of a livelihood option, and the sustainable development of communities. On another point, if we were able to complete the hydro project that was part of the initial initial payment, phase 1, today we would have had 165 megawatts of hydropower. That would have been clean power, and our people would have been enjoying power at about 40% less than what they're paying today. We had challenges, and as Sir Tony Blair said, policy predictability and understanding the long game is important. We had a period of a change in government when the LCDS was put on the back burner, and we lost time, we lost opportunity, we lost revenue, we lost our global position. Before 2015, we were leading on this issue globally. For 5 years, we lost that leadership role because this was not seen as a priority. Once again, we have not only reintroduced it as a priority, we have expanded it to include the blue economy, include biodiversity, and really enhance it as a true economic model. This is not a climate model or environmental model. These are aspects of what I would say is a comprehensive, sustainable economic model in a low carbon environment.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for showing how that really brings a sense of reality in the implementation focus and addressing the urgent needs that face us as a result of the climate crisis. And I now go back to Minister Reem. Minister Reem, could you share with us, we're at two different ends of the world, Guyana and the UAE. Yet, there is so much that could be done for cooperation, for collaboration. We can join hands together for areas that weren't possible before because of the availability of technology and how the world is moving. Could you give us some perspectives on how we could approach that, where you think would be the lowest hanging fruits in moving forward in that light?
Thank you. I guess that's today true of many countries that find themselves on opposite ends of the earth. But if there's a meeting of the minds and perhaps even a meeting of the hearts, there's a way to actually connect and do a lot with. And that in many ways is actually our experience with Guyana. It's still nascent and budding, but it's incredibly promising. We're looking at several projects, primarily in the renewable energy sector, but also in the agriculture sector, which we're very keen on. I'm likely to visit you in the next couple of weeks to come back once more with a larger team. But I think the important message here is there are many untraditional forms of partnerships that are happening without the need of any form of broker. Because what technology has done is it's equaled the playing field to allow for folks to find each other if they have an intent to find new opportunities. And our country, or my country, the United Arab Emirates, has always been very forward-leaning in trying to find those new and different forms of relationships beyond our strong, strategic, important ones. And Guyana is, I think, a case in point. The other really phenomenal response in the UAE for Guyana is the global positioning of Guyana at the top of the continent, linking the northern Brazilian market to the rest of CARICOM. That we find incredibly appealing as well and are really looking forward to doing more. I think if there's intent, clear planning, and a strong commitment from the very top, which both of my leader has with the Guyanese leadership, then you see transformation come into play. And I look forward to the next COP, wherever it may be, and certainly the COP after that in Brazil, for us to also share with you and say, 2 years ago in Dubai when we discussed A, B, and C, we are now bearing those fruits, inshallah.
Absolutely, and I hope that many of us in the room here are able to rejoin at COP29 and COP30 as we continue this discussion. I feel very guilty now because we've spoken a lot, but we need to speak with you as well, to hear from you, to have perspectives that you would like to share. I know in the room today we have persons with experience and lessons learned from the architecture of RED Plus transaction, from the FCLP, from the Guyana-Norway agreement and other bilateral experiences that you would like to bring to bear and maybe establish relationships and connectivity with the Guyana story. So I now hand over to the audience. I will open by giving our Vice President, the Honorable Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo, for any perspectives he might wish to share, and then we hand over to the audience.
I was hoping to get the questions first.
You couldn't get away that easy.
So our President pointed out what's happening in Guyana, but I think it's important to know why we're here. We're here at COP to find a solution to net zero. And although our experience has been a great one in Guyana, we wanted to highlight the role that forests can play as part of that solution. The President outlined when he spoke at the United Nations that we believe that there are several things that have to be done simultaneously to get to net zero in the least painful manner. One is some reduction in fossil fuel. 2, introducing renewable energy at scale. 3, some form of demand management. 4, new technology. And 5, tackling deforestation. The problem globally is that we don't see enough attention on forests. Somehow there is a belief that forests could be saved through philanthropy or pledges, like the Glasgow Pledge by leaders to end deforestation by 2030. But these are living assets. They contribute to livelihoods. People use them for their economic well-being, the forests in their country. And the only way we believe that you can save forests is to outcompete their alternate use. And we're not going to do this with public money. Right now, we can't raise enough public money to fund, to keep the pledges that were made since Copenhagen. The $100 billion per annum, funding adaptation at scale. And even when funds are there, they're not intermediated properly to countries. But the fact is, if we can't find public money to save these forests to outcompete alternate use, we have to find a market-based mechanism to do that. And we can do so because forest carbon is valuable. In fact, it's more valuable than any other form of carbon because of the additional benefits it brings, the biodiversity and other ecosystem service benefits. So the world has been focused. We can't get to markets for forests because some NGOs and the developed world seems obsessed with standards. And we're letting the obsession with getting the standards right towards something that could be a useful solution in the fight for climate change. And we are losing our forests rapidly. So we believe that our model has answered all the questions that are raised in the global, the things that people raise globally to prevent the market from being developed for forests. Could the forest be measured? Any change in forest carbon? We have had 10 years of robust MRV tracking every change in the forest and on-the-ground probing. We have annual verifications. So you get what you pay for. Secondly, we have demonstrated that indigenous communities, people who live in forests, they can be integrated and they can benefit from this model. Because there was a fear that it would affect land tenure. It's 14%. We moved it to 14, not 40%, the indigenous communities in Guyana. Thank you for mentioning that. This model here, it's the biggest injection of funds, just in this 1 year of sale, of 30% of our forest carbon to HES for a minimum of 750 million, because we built in the agreement an upside. So if it gets traded on secondary markets, we get 60% of the upside. So because we want that to happen. So indigenous communities could be involved. The 4 indigenous organizations and the NTC now sit on a steering committee chaired by the president of Guyana. They meet to oversee the low carbon development strategy. They're at the table. Thirdly, we demonstrated that you can use the money accountably. We have had a bad experience with Norway. Money that we earned from Norway 15 years ago, we still can't spend it until now because it's stuck in some multilateral institution. I'm not telling tales here, but it's something that we have had to fix. The new model now emphasizes accountability. So every question raised, permanence, etc., whether money would be stolen, can you involve the country? We have answered in our model because we set out 15 years ago to build a model to show that these questions can be answered and then replicated across the world so that we can move forward to using forests more as part of a global mitigation solution. We've stuck there. And so part of what we're here for is to draw back attention to forests. We really have to outcompete alternate use. The same way with fossil fuel. We talk a lot. We want to triple renewable energy by 2030. But how are we going to do so if we don't have a carbon price? The carbon price is the mechanism to outcompete the production of fossil fuel. Because if we can make renewable energy through a carbon price more profitable than fossil fuel, naturally the investments would flow in this area. And so too in the forestry sector, we have to now create the market for this. And that is, so we wanted to draw attention, not just to what is happening in Guyana, but also to forests. Forests, we have to have a renew. There was a time 15 years ago that we thought we were there. And now we've faded back to philanthropy. We're hoping at this COP, people would sit up and say, how do we save the forest? It has to be by money at scale. And it can come from markets, carefully done, with appropriate standards too. But that's why we are so pleased with the art, because it was jurisdictional scale certification. And the model, the standards are pretty tough. We're upset with them. Our benchmarks were lower than we wanted, but it was a robust standard. So you can find the standards. But every time you hear talk of forest, they talk about leakages, and then everyone dumps it. But we can't achieve net zero without forests being part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. I now pass over to the audience. Mary, you can have a seat here. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Mary Grady, the head of the Arts Secretariat, who's been a key success factor in the Guyana story. So I open for questions in the audience. Please show by a raise of hand. I would appreciate if you could say your name and the organization that you represent. Third row, Kevin. Mary?
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, Josh Gabatis from Carbon Brief. So I know that these issues have been touched on across the talks, but I suppose, we have heard a lot over the past year in particular about many controversies around carbon offsetting, carbon credits, particularly to do with forest protection and avoided deforestation. Is it not quite a significant risk to be working with, particularly with the oil sector, which produces very real hard emissions, and offsetting that with emissions avoidance, which comes with all sorts of issues, lots of problems with methodologies that have been revealed. Is that not a big concern if we're talking about achieving net zero or net negative even?
President Ali?
It's 154 million tons removal every year from our forests, apart from the avoidance.
So the question is a practical question with a practical answer. What is the alternative? And that is the scenario. We always find the creative way of putting them against each other. Now, we have a scenario in the world. Not only do we have a gap in energy supply, we have energy poverty, we have energy inequality. We also have more than 27% of the world's energy that is generated from coal. So we have to be incremental. We have to first talk about how do we address this 27%, because that is the most polluting form of producing energy. The second issue is the contribution that the forests make, and not only in the carbon capture and storage, but also in biodiversity and all the other areas. What should we do? In Guyana's case, we have recently found petroleum, oil, and we have made it very clear that we're going to develop this sector. But even with the development of this sector, we're still going to be net positive. The question you ask is whether it's a conflict or whether it's hypocrisy isn't it hypocrisy for the world to ask the developing world especially to keep the standing forests with no value attached to it? The developing world can say we can go and monetize the full value of the forest. Then what happens? What happens to the contribution of the forests in the climate equation? So we have to, and we're going to move to a point where by 2050 we'll determine what percentage of the world energy comes from fossil fuel, what comes from renewable. When we determine what percentage comes from fossil fuel, we'll have to then determine what are the criteria to be assigned as to who will produce that percentage. And if you're saying that the highest weight is on the least emission, then Guyana will be in a great position when it comes to that. So I don't see a conflict. And this is the problem. We moved the discourse on net zero from how do we get to net zero by 2050 to how do we end petroleum. That is a new narrative. How do we end petroleum? As a result, we have not been able to bring the petroleum producers, the companies around the table, negotiation table, to squeeze them so they can put more money into research and development, so they can put more money into renewable, so that they can invest in technology for more carbon capture to enhance their operations. This is a type of discussion that would allow us in a very balanced way to get to net zero without destroying a platform in which we can have collaboration. I think the time has come for us to take a step back, recognize the difficulties and the complexity of the challenge, but bring all the stakeholders together so we can have collaboration in getting to net zero.
If you have any solution in a developed country, carbon capture and storage, that removes 154 million tons, they get paid for that. But in our case, it must be a free solution to the world. And so when you mention this, it's not just the avoided deforestation we're talking about. The storage of 19.5 gigatons. Every year our forests remove 154 million tons. At peak oil production, 1.6 million barrels per day, we would only use up 20% of that allowance at peak oil production. We will still be nationally a carbon negative country. And if every country was carbon negative in the world, then the world would be carbon negative or carbon neutral. So solutions often that are provided by our forests, somehow in the developed world they feel those should be for free. But let's pay the people who are doing carbon capture and storage project the money, a large sum of money, give them the credits. But these guys who have a natural forest that they can cut down, because the choice is they can cut it down and also deploy it into mining or agriculture. They make a conscious choice of keeping it there. It serves a global climate benefit, but they can't get paid for it. It must be for free. So that is what.
Thank you, Vice President. President Duque.
I just wanted to make three short comments. One has to do with our reality in terms of funding for the Global South. And we have to acknowledge that when we look at the IMF numbers, most of the Global South has a relation of debt to GDP that is above 90%, which means there's very limited fiscal space to finance climate action just from the budget of the countries. And actually, climate change or the climate crisis we face is not just a market failure, it's a government failure. And the market, through carbon credits, has become an instrument to mobilize massively resources that are connected not only to the protection of forests, but also to energy transition and so on. So yes, we have to guarantee full integrity. better auditing experiences. But I have to say it bluntly, the only mechanism, for example, that I foresee in Africa that has to invest $1.8 trillion in the next 7 years has to be through a massive mobilization of resources that will connect the credits with the projects. And the second, when we look at Latin America, 47% of our greenhouse gases emissions come from deforestation and negative use of land. 47%. So we definitely have to tackle that issue, and it's the best contribution we can get, and especially in the Amazon, because the Amazon captures 10% of all the greenhouse gases emissions every year. And we have a country that is the best story inside the Amazon on containing deforestation. So I want to highlight that as a very important element out of the strategy of Guyana. And if Guyana serves through having all these market-driven, nature-based solutions to deploy the capital, I think it's a good story to tell. And finally, and I will connect this with the IDB, smart finance. And this is a suggestion, Ali, that we've spoken. Guyana has now, with the low-carbon development strategy, the possibility to be the second green taxonomy in the Western Hemisphere. And why the green taxonomy will be very important? Because it can also help the IDB to mobilize policy-based loans based on results met in terms of the low-carbon development strategy. Second, you can have the debt swaps in the Caribbean. Third, you can have mechanisms of guarantees for local governments so that they don't have to depend on national governments, because if they give a guarantee, it will be counted as a loan. So if you have the guarantees from the multilaterals, they would allow to the local governments to deploy the capital that is needed. And last but not least, you can definitely find a mechanism with biodiversity credits to compensate, not avoiding deforestation, but actually having the protection effectively of the forest and being able to have a permanent capturing of greenhouse gases. So those 3 comments, because I think the question allows to say this and highlight the importance of Guyana. I don't know, Tony, if you want to add.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And perhaps this is a good time to move to some closing remarks. So, Prime Minister Blair, if you would give us your perspectives and any closing remarks.
So I just want to say 2 things in closing, apart from, again, congratulating Guyana on what you've done and your strategy for the future. The first is that the important thing about this COP, I think, will be that it focuses on practical solutions. Because if the solutions aren't practical, they're not going to be accepted. And that is very important. And there always comes a moment with any difficult political situation where there will be a very active campaign, and that campaign is important. But at some point you have to take it out of the realm of the campaign and put it in the realm of practical policy, right? And that, if this COP can achieve anything, it will be that, which is why the loss and damage announcement yesterday was important, because it's practical. Likewise, with the announcement by Sheikh Mohammed today of the $30 billion fund, that is going to be money that is going to be used for practical purposes. The second thing is this, and my institute works in many, many developing countries around the world. There will not be an answer to this problem if we try to tell developing countries not to develop. All the countries we work in, they are countries that want connectivity with electricity, they want connectivity to the internet, they want transport links, they want air links, and they're going to get them. And they're not going to listen to anybody who says, look, I'm very sorry we created this problem, but now you guys have got to pay for it. That is not going to work. And that's why the essence of this is, as President Duque was just saying, it's about practical measures to get the climate finance flowing. Because if you can't do that, if you can't finance projects of renewable energy, projects that, for example, allow you to use energy much more efficiently, things like, I mean, we're doing in Kenya, for example, a national agriculture data platform to allow them to do farming much more efficiently. It's practical things that will allow us to solve this, and it's getting projects in which people are going to put their money. And it's got to be projects in which they're really going to put their money, not where they're going to come to a conference and say they're going to put money. But the trillions of dollars people talk about, they're in pension funds, they're in sovereign funds. These people have got responsibilities to their stakeholders, right? They're not going to put the money into these projects unless they're projects that are properly put together with a proper rate of return. So we've got to accept that and realize that. And if we focus on the practical, we get a chance of succeeding. And that's why I support what Guyana's doing, because it's practical. You know, you're going to protect your forest, but you're going to turn it into an asset, but you're going to make sure your people develop their economy at the same time. And that's a way of making this thing work. Everything else belongs in the realm of campaigns, but unfortunately also belongs in the realm of fantasy, and we need practical plans if we're going to solve this problem.
Well said, Prime Minister Blair. I now pass over to President Goldfan for closing remarks, and then to our host, President Ali, to close the session.
So let me continue where Sir Tony Blair finished. We need to be practical, and I think the multilaterals have a role of implementing the projects, implementing the ideas. Regional integration in the Amazon Forever program that we are doing with Brazil, with the Amazon countries, where we are looking not only at deforestation and monitoring, but actually offering alternatives, activity alternatives, the bioeconomy, the sustainable agriculture. Realizing when you live there, you realize that a good part of the population lives in cities. You need to deal with the cities. You need to deal with the people, with the communities. So you need to have a holistic view, and you need the resources coming from the rest of the world. So you need to bring the donors together. And that's where the multilaterals have a role, because you can integrate, bring the donors, and have the actual projects where we know the reality. So that's the Amazon Forever. And that's where I think it's important. And Guyana has a very interesting feature for us, because it's part of the regional program for the Amazon, but also part of the Caribbean project at the same time. So for us, you are part of two very important regional programs. Thank you.
Thank you, President Goldfan. President Ali, to wrap us up for today.
Okay, so I have to run. But let me say this. From what we have heard today, there are more opportunities than challenges. In the concluding remarks, we are sure that there are many opportunities that will come out of this COP and out of the LCDS. Now, as we move towards, as I said, this is a working model. In the next year, you will see us building out the biodiversity pillar, the marine economy pillar, and the financing for these pillars will have to come from revenues that we'll earn from the carbon sale in the forest. So we look forward to working with you and engaging with you as we continue to build this model forward. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.